FindAGrave just announced two big updates. One that will impact the memorials created for the recently deceased, and one for who qualifies for a required transfer of a memorial. It's a lot to cover, so let's dive right in. The first update pertains to a sensitive subject, and that is the creation of memorials of the recently deceased. Now, this change comes about because more and more people are discovering that someone on FindAGrave has created a memorial for their loved one even before the funeral has taken place. Now, when you go onto FindAGrave, it will ask you if you are a close relative of the deceased. And if you answer yes, it will ask you how you are related. FindAGrave is asking this because for the first 3 months after a person's death, their FindAGrave memorial will list only limited information, basically their name, date of birth, and date of death, provided that that memorial was not created by a close family member or isn't managed by a close family member. Also, during the first 3 months after someone has died, their FindAGrave memorial, as well as the listing that pops up when you do a search on the site, those will both have a link to manage. And it makes it a lot more obvious to family members that they can request to have that memorial transferred to them. This is something that so many families didn't realize before. So now, in those first 3 months after a person's death, when a close family member clicks that link to manage and tells FindAGrave how they're related, provided that it's within the guidelines, that transfer is automatic. No more having to wait for the memorial creator to approve it, nothing like that. It's just automatic. Now, between 3 months and 1 year after the death, that button will still appear on the memorial, but it's a little bit ambiguous as to whether or not the transfer will be instantaneous. As the support page is currently written, FindAGrave says, to request to manage a memorial for someone you are related to within our updated transfer guidelines who has died in the past year, select Manage and go through the process to become the manager of the memorial. So it is still a bit ambiguous as to whether or not it will be instantaneous or if it still has to go through an approval process. Now, remember I said that in the first 3 months after someone's death that their FindAGrave memorial will have very limited information? Well, once a close family member begins to manage that memorial, or once it hits that 3-month mark, then the memorial will show all of the information that the creator might have added to that memorial. It will look just like any other memorial on the site. You might be wondering, how does this keep people from lying? Won't unscrupulous memorial creators just fib and say that they are closely related to everyone? How does this protect the families of the recently deceased? Here's the cool thing about that relationship question being on there. FindAGrave can see who is marking themselves as being closely related. Some people create dozens, even hundreds of memorials every week. Even during a pandemic, nobody is losing hundreds of close family members every single week. So having this question on there is a way for FindAGrave to flag unscrupulous behavior. I do need to add that the vast majority of FindAGrave volunteers are wonderful people, and they do so much to help the genealogy community. It's been a small minority of FindAGrave volunteers who haven't been as sensitive as they could be to the families of the recently deceased. I've used the phrase close family member several times, and that brings us up to the second big FindAGrave update, and that is an expansion of the relationship that are required transfers. Previously, to have a required transfer, you had to be within 4 generations of the deceased. So basically, that would be you back to your great-grandparents, or you down to your great-grandchildren. But it didn't include anything like aunts or uncles. It didn't include any in-laws or any step relationships. And although most FindAGrave users would transfer outside of the required relationships, sometimes you would come across a FindAGrave volunteer who would not transfer to a family member even if they themselves were not related to the deceased. And this caused a lot of stress and anguish for people who wanted to manage the memorial of a maiden aunt who never had children. Well, now those required relationships have been expanded. As of the time of this recording, here is how FindAGrave is defining a relationship that is a required transfer. Child, spouse or partner, sibling, parent, grandchild, great-grandchild, grandparent, great-grandparent, niece or nephew, great-niece or nephew, aunt or uncle, great-aunt or uncle, or first cousin. And even better, FindAGrave goes on to say, this would include adoptive, step, and in-law versions of those relationships. FindAGrave has also clarified what happens when two close family members want to manage the same memorial. Again, as of the time of this recording, if two members are related within these guidelines and both would like to manage the memorial, the member with the closer relationship should be given management. I think these two updates by FindAGrave are a great step forward in being sensitive to the families of the recently deceased, and can help even more family members manage the memorials of their loved ones. I'm curious to know what you think. Let me know down in the comments what you think about these changes. Do you think that they'll help? Also, down in the description, I will have links to the 2 updated support pages on FindAGrave, so you can learn even more about these updates. Want to make even more discoveries in your family history? Check out one of the videos that's popping up on your screen right now. Happy researching!